Welcome to the Blitz Take episode number 14. I am here with Scott Wright, who is a writer for Oklahoma State football, and I'm excited to hear what his thoughts are on this upcoming season. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question is, what are your thoughts on the schedule?
The schedule, I think, sets up really good for Oklahoma State because you look at what they've got in the non-conference. First of all, they begin on a Thursday night against Central Michigan. Mike Gundy really likes doing that to have an extra couple of days to rest after the first game. Then they've got Arizona State coming in for the second non-conference game, and that's one of those games when you actually schedule it. It's been on the schedule for 7 years or so now. You don't know what kind of program Arizona State is going to have, and obviously they're going through some stuff right now out there, and so that game looks a little bit easier maybe than it could have been back when you originally scheduled it. And Arkansas Pine Bluff in the third non-conference game, then a week off before you jump into Big 12 play. So I think it sets up really well. The one trick about this schedule is that the two most important games in the Big 12 season are both on the road, at Baylor and at OU. So those are the main issues that you see when you look at the schedule. But otherwise, it's a fairly favorable one. Not a lot of long road trips for this program this year. Really, Baylor down in Waco, Texas, or up to Kansas State, Manhattan, Kansas. That's as far as they go this year. So in terms of the long distance trips, so not a lot of long flights, things like that could impact a team. So the schedule sets up really good.
My second question is, what are your thoughts on the new recruits?
They've got a really strong class in. A lot of guys, I think 10 or 11 guys that were in spring came in early, including quarterback Garrett Rangel. Obviously he's not going to be needed as a starter this year unless something happens to Spencer Sanders. But that's been a little bit of a trend throughout Sanders' career. He hasn't played every game of a season throughout in any of his 3 seasons. So he's always missed at least one game, and they've had to rely on a backup to step into that role. So, but Rangel will be battling with Gunnar Gundy, Mike's son, for the backup quarterback job. You've got a receiver like Talon Shetron, who was a very highly regarded wideout from Edmond Santa Fe here in Oklahoma, originally committed to Oklahoma, and then his brother got an OSU offer as a tight end, and they decided to stick together and came up to Oklahoma State together. So two guys that Oklahoma State is very excited about in the passing game. The one good thing about this class is that they don't have a lot of guys who are going to need to be forced into action right away. They were really happy with the defensive ends that they brought in, but they've got a ton of veteran defensive ends that are going to be able to hold that spot down, let those young guys develop and grow into those positions. Same thing on the offensive line, with the exception of Tyrone Weber, a junior college transfer who has a chance to maybe earn a starting job. And then you've got Xavier Benson at linebacker, another junior college transfer who has a real chance to be a starter in that group as they replace their two starters at linebacker that are both moved on to the NFL, and Malcolm Rodriguez and Devin Harper. So they did a really good job of addressing needs with this recruiting class, and also building for the future, building some depth at some positions where, like receiver. They have always had the ability to reload rather than rebuild at the receiver position throughout Mike Gundy's tenure, and they're doing that again.
What are your thoughts on the offensive and defensive side?
I'll start with the defense because that's where the most questions are. Obviously, they were incredibly talented on defense last season. You look at what they've got coming back on the defensive line. They led the nation with 55 sacks a year ago. Most of those guys are back. They only lost 2 guys out of the primary rotation on the defensive line. That was Israel Antwine, who's in camp with the Jacksonville Jaguars right now, and Jaden Jernigan, who transferred to Missouri. So they do have some holes to fill in the back end of the depth chart at defensive tackle because of those 2 departures. Everybody that played defensive end is back, including Brock Martin, who came back for a super senior year, who's been their starter basically his entire career. Tyler Lacey on the other side is a redshirt senior, and then Colin Oliver was just a true freshman last year, and came in and led the Big 12 in sacks in his first season. So, and not only that, they had Trace Ford, who was out last season because of a torn ACL, who is back and healthy again. So, he was a guy that his first two seasons was a really exciting talent at that defensive end position. So they've got some incredible depth on the defensive line. They've got some other faces that are going to step in and be contributors as well. But a lot to be excited about on the defensive line in particular. Linebacker, more of a question because they did lose those two guys that I talked about. They've got to fill those holes, and the secondary had a lot of departures as well. They've got Jason Taylor back, who was one of their most important defensive players last year. Go back to a couple of crucial wins that they had in the middle of the season at Boise State. He blocks a field goal that would have given Boise State the lead with a little over a minute left in that game. And then at Texas, Oklahoma State falls behind early. Texas is driving with a chance to make it a 3-score game, and Taylor picks off a pass and goes 85 with a pick six, completely flipped the complexion of that game. Oklahoma State comes back and wins it. So really critical player in that secondary. The most experienced starter they've got back, Thomas Harper, another guy that has a lot of experience, hasn't really been a starter in his career, but he's a senior who has played a lot, been in the primary rotation throughout his career. And the other three defensive back spots, they play 5 DBs all the time. The other three are going to be new starters all the way across the board. Even though they're excited about what they've got at corner in Jabbar Muhammad and Corey Black, they're still putting them in situations they've never been in as starters before. So they've got some questions to answer on that side of the ball. And obviously the biggest change is the new defensive coordinator and Derek Mason, who replaces Jim Knowles after 4 years. So a lot more question marks on that side of the ball. You look at the offense. The offensive line had a really rough spring because they had a lot of guys, starters from last fall who were getting some injuries cleaned up. They had 3 guys with labrum injuries in their shoulders who all missed spring. So, but they got those guys back and healthy now. They're ready to go. They've got some other guys stepping in to some key roles. Had a couple of transfers off at the portal that came in to give them some depth on the offensive line, and that really helps to solidify that group. Just not real sure exactly who the starting 5 are going to be right now, but they have some really healthy competition going on there. Spencer Sanders is back at quarterback for his 4th season in that role. Each year throughout his career, he's become a little bit more consistent. Still had those issues. You look at the Big 12 championship game when he went out through 4 interceptions and they ended up losing by 5 points. Obviously, not a game that he's incredibly proud of, but he bounces back and has the best game of his career in the Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame. Throws for 371, rushes for 125, and produces 4 total touchdowns. So, and they rallied from 21 down to win that game in a thriller. So, got to be excited there. They were really young at receiver outside of Tay Martin, who was their number 1 guy last year. And they were really young. Besides him, all those young guys got a lot of valuable experience. They're really excited about the talent and the depth they've got at receiver. Running back is probably the biggest question facing the offensive side of the ball. Dominic Richardson was one of 4 guys that were in that committee last year that was led by Jalen Warren. But the other 3 are all gone, including Warren, who's in camp with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. So you look at that position, and you've got to develop some depth behind Richardson because at the college level you're going to get guys banged up, especially a guy like Richardson that's a really runner and a really physical guy. There's going to be times when he's got to come out of the game and maintain his health. So those are all critical pieces as they try to figure out what they're going to do behind him at running back to try to make sure they've got some depth.
So what are your thoughts on the conference?
The conference is very interesting. Obviously, not looking just at this season. You've got the looming move of Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC here in the next couple of years. You got the new programs that are coming in next year with Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and Central Florida. So it's a really a really unique time because there's all these changes coming. But right now, it's all the same crew, all the same teams that you're used to facing. So you got to be ready for that. Baylor was voted by the media as the preseason #1 in this conference. I'm a little bit curious about that. They've got to change at quarterback, and obviously, they've got a lot of key pieces back on defense and some other places that are going to make them good again. But it's a little unclear just what kind of team they're going to be at the quarterback position. So, then Oklahoma obviously going through a ton of changes with Lincoln Riley leaving, Brent Venables coming in, new quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. So there's a lot of fluctuation in some of these top teams that are going to make things interesting. Whereas Oklahoma State is really solidified, particularly on the offense. They are going through some changes on the defense that I talked about, but quarterback experience is such a valuable item, and they've got a ton of it with Spencer Sanders. So you look at the depth of this conference. I think it has really improved. I think that Steve Sarkisian has Texas going in the right direction. I think that Kansas State is getting better. I think TCU, even going through a coaching change, they have a lot of talent to work with, and are going to stay in that as a really strong team in that middle tier. So it's a really interesting time because I think that there are a lot of very competitive teams in this league.
My last question is, what game are you most looking forward to covering?
Every year, the easy answer is the Bedlam game, and so with that, I'll give you another one. But about Bedlam, we don't know if it's going to be able to continue when Oklahoma heads to the SEC. This might be coming up on the last 1 or 2 times that we get to see the Bedlam series in action, at least for an extended period of time for a while here. And maybe they can bring it back in the future. That'd be great. I think the people of Oklahoma would love that. The fans around here, it's such an exciting game, and it's become an attractive thing on the TV landscape as well. So always has good ratings. So that game is always a blast. Covering it in Norman is always fun because they pack that place. Obviously, they pack both places whenever Bedlam pops up on the schedule. But seeing the hostile territory element for Oklahoma State is always a fun thing to witness and see what that program, what that stadium gets like in that game is a lot of fun. Beyond that, I'm really curious to see Arizona State, more so because of all the changes that program has been going through, all the roster turnover. I want to see what that program looks like. Herm Edwards is obviously such a respected guy, so want to see what he's doing with that program. At Baylor is the one of the top 2 most important games on this schedule for Oklahoma State. That's a fun environment. The students get really active there. It's a place that Oklahoma State goes and has had some mixed results at times. So that's probably the game outside of Bedlam that I'm most looking forward to. Obviously, they had 2 really good games against Baylor last year. They held on to beat them in Stillwater, and then had the Big 12 championship game. So, when you look down the road, when OU and Texas are gone, you look at a budding rivalry. I think that has a chance to be a really strong one for Oklahoma State within the Big 12 conference.
It should definitely be interesting to watch this team compete. And thank you so much for coming on, and hope to have you back on soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, man.
Thank you.